Mhm.
All right, we will get started. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bill Padnes. I am the Director of Workforce Development for the Non-Ferrous Founder Society. Before I introduce our speakers, I wanted to remind everyone that webinar is being recorded and that you are set to mute. During the webinar, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A or your comments in the chat, and we will answer them at the appropriate time. At the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A session where you can ask your questions directly or by posting. Now for this webinar, which I am so excited to welcome Craftsman with Character, a rapidly growing workforce development organization that's transforming how high school students connect with careers in the skilled trades. Currently active in 23 schools across 3 states, and they're expanding to 60 schools in 7 states this upcoming school year. Craftsman with Character partners with schools and local businesses, provide hands-on mentorship and job shadowing experiences that build both technical skills and strong character. This is backed by the U.S. Navy and embraced by industry leaders, especially the Non-Ferrous Founder Society. Their program is a powerful solution for manufacturers and foundries looking to strengthen their workforce pipeline and invest in the next generation of talent. Now, you don't have to hear from me anymore, so let's get started. Please welcome Dave, Kristen, and Tim from Craftsman with Character to talk about their amazing student engagement program.
Hey, thanks, Bill. I do have one question before you don't say any more. I was explaining to my wife last night. I was telling her that we're doing this today with your folks. And she goes, well, how are they different from the Steel Founder Society? She goes, I don't understand. So I explained it. I have my theory of how you guys are different from steel, but could I hear your explanation first?
Well, we are non-ferrous. So
She
we
has no
are
clue what that means.
So non-ferrous and Jared Weaver, who is our executive director, is also on this. But the main difference is in terms of iron and steel is
Yep.
really where the difference is. For us, our members work in aluminum. They work in copper. They work in bronze. Um, it's just but they also do work
Yeah.
in ferrous metals. But really, the difference is the type of metal is the
I
difference.
Perfect. I got it right then. And she understood. I said, it's all a matter of the iron and the steel. And she goes, okay, that makes sense.
Yes,
So
but we
thank you.
are with Steel Founders. We're great partners with them.
Yep.
So they're
Yep.
a wonderful organization, and we work with them and the other actually metal casting associations that are out there.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, and I appreciate you being here. And I have spoken to the Steel Founder Society several times and just really have gotten to know some of those folks and have really, really enjoyed it. So before I go further, Kristen, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Oh, sure. My name's Kristen Beischel. I'm the head of marketing at Craftsman with Character, and I help support Dave and the team on spreading the word and onboarding businesses like yours.
Awesome. And Tim, who are you, by the way? Because I'm going to be calling on you a bit.
Sure. My name's Tim Drinkwater. I am a volunteer with Craftsman with Character. I've served in the facilitator role. I own a small machine shop in Janesville, Wisconsin, and it's been a terrific experience so far, and I can't wait for the next semester to start.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. So, Kristen, next slide then, and then I'll get a little introduction here. So, again, my name is Dave Hataj, and I'm a second generation owner of Edgerton Gear. My dad started the business in 1962, the year before I was born. My mom was pregnant with me when they moved to Edgerton, and I started working in the shop when I was, well, I'd say 5 years old, but my mom now tells me she's 87 that she had me in a bassinet in the office with a milling machine right next to it. So I've been sucking in cutting oil and fumes since I was probably 6 months old. I grew up through the business, became a journeyman machinist by the time I was 22, and left the family business. I kind of had enough by that point, and kind of ran away from home. Came back 8 years later with a wife and a young son, and came back into the business and really helped the transition so my dad could retire, and have been dealing with workforce development issues my entire career, even back in the early 90s, as probably a lot of you could agree with. The folks entering the trades has been on a downward trajectory as long as I can remember. My instructor at the tech college when I was an apprentice, he often told our class that us journeyman machinists will be kind of like free agents in the future, where there's just not going to be many of us. And how's industry going to manage? So coming back, and I was 20, 21, 22. Like, yeah, whatever. That makes no sense to me. Didn't really care. But then when I started taking over the business and we're trying to find really quality employees, the biggest thing that we ran into over and over, which maybe a lot of you could understand, is yeah, we could find people that could be machinists, but we were poaching them from other companies because there weren't a lot of people to choose from. But we're hiring guys that they had bad habits, their character was suspect. I went through a pretty excruciating period where when I came back, my dad had 17 employees, and within 5 years, only 5 of those were left. And the issues were 12 of those employees were alcoholics, brought their issues to work. There was a lot of dysfunction, a lot of infighting. And as my career went on as a young man, I realized, I can teach skills, we can teach skills, but the biggest issue is the character part of it. We need good people. We don't just need people with skills, but we need good people that are not only going to show up on time, but are going to enjoy what they do, are going to interact with people, that you can trust them. They're people of the word. They're going to shake your hand and look you in the eye. They're going to follow through. They're committed to excellence. They're, all those things that we need good people to do. And so I kind of really went through a crisis in trying to figure this out. And I was up at our local high school at one point where, again, another high school that really started shuttering their tech ed department. In the 1990s, I discovered that high schools across the country really started reducing or basically closing their tech ed department. So the crisis that we're all experiencing in workforce literally is a whole generation where we've lost a generation of kids that should be in our shops and our factories and so on. But we've really missed them. So those questions that were on that screen a second ago, what's your turnover? Yeah, real quick, average when I was running the shop, our average age, even up to 10 years ago, was probably in the mid to late 40s. And I'm wondering if you thought for a second what your average age in your shop is. I was talking to one of our customers yesterday in Ohio, and a machine shop that makes braiding equipment for the auto industry. And he said the average age in his shop is in the early 60s. So he's kind of panicking. What is he going to do? How is he going to replace that? What is your turnover rate? We were talking to another company up in Michigan a couple of weeks ago. It was actually a plumbing company. They said that they had 45 people turnover in the last year, a full third of their workforce. And the last question I often ask when you think about it, how much are you or I spending annually on recruitment? We're here in Wisconsin, so Oshkosh Truck and some of our other folks that we know, they came up with a number between 23,000 and 31,000 per employee to recruit and train and retain, which gets pretty dang costly. Next slide, Kristen. So I'm just going to give you, I'm explaining the why I got into this and why this program exists. I found this little chart from the U.S. labor statistics that the black dots on the left show that 2.8 million jobs we're going to be losing in the next 5 years or 8 years. It says 2020 to 33, just to retirement alone. And so as we all know in manufacturing, we do have an aging demographic. There's not enough young people moving into the trades and manufacturing. So, and if you look at the chart on the right, those green dots on our current trend, we're only going to be replacing half of those. And so even without any manufacturing growth, and and President Trump and others are talking about bringing manufacturing back to the US, just on the current level, we're already in a really bad deficit, and it's going to get a lot worse. So seeing that, we're realizing yeah, we got to figure out how to get our young people, high school students, engaged, get them into our companies and show them that they have a great career path rather than this whole mantra of all students need to go to a four-year university. I've been doing this for 12 years. I started because I was one of those shop kids that were trying to figure out what my career path should be. I wasn't great in high school, but I was good in my shop classes. And so I ended up going back to school in 2010 and trying to figure out, what do blue collar kids like me and others need? How do we find our career path? How do we fit and find our way into our companies? And the thing that I uncovered and realized is the way our schools are right now, the kids have almost zero exposure to our companies. You can drive right past all of our buildings. High school students and most of our community members have no clue what most of us do. Yesterday, in fact, our City Works department, we had a graduation day for all of our this year's crop of Craftsman with Character students. Our City Works department, which is involved in our course, they brought about 9 people, and they said, "Hey, this first time they're in our building, can we get a tour?" And they were blown away because here they're plowing our streets. They see what they do. You know, they come by here every day. Had no idea what we do, which I could almost guarantee that's probably the way it is in your communities. So the big thing about Craftsman with Character, which we'll explain over this webinar, is it's exposure, getting the kids to see what we do and showing them different career paths than what they're just exposed to in high school. And the other part is the mentoring aspect, which we'll talk about too. But since we've done this, our average age in our class right now or in our shop is probably around age 30. I've got 5 young high school interns all starting this summer. We're only a 40-man shop, but I've got 5 18-year-olds, 17 and 18-year-olds starting in the next week. So it's over 12 years. It's lowered our age in our shop to age 30. We have a waiting list of young people that want to work here, and it's completely changed our culture. So we started sharing this because it made such an impact on us and other businesses in the community. And 2.5 years ago, the U.S. Navy got a hold of us and said, "Hey, how can you take this national?" Which, again, I'm a small shop guy. How in the world do we grow this nationally? I don't know. So now I've got a great team with Kristen, Deb, and Michael that are helping us really grow this. So Kristen, anything that I've missed so far, part of the
No,
story?
you keep it up.
Okay, because I don't want to be really just babbling the whole time, but
Nope.
I want to give you the highlights. So what is Craftsman character? So one of the big things we realized, building character cannot happen in a week. It cannot happen in a classroom that you sit and talk about it. It really has to happen over 4 months. I think there's some statistics that talk about how long it takes to form a habit. And the big thing, and when I was studying all this, we have to realize that we can teach competency, technical skills, but the soft skills are skills, that we talk about. It's a kind of a buzzword these days, soft skills. Well, what is that? It's, as I said earlier, showing up on time, being committed to excellence, getting out of bed. One of our young ladies in our class this year said it's hygiene. I don't want to be around stinky people, which cracked me up. But it's all those things that I'm sure everybody on this call, you intuitively know what it takes to be successful. You're disciplined. You know that you got to pay attention to detail. You got to get along with other people. And so the character part, which is often very lacking in education these days, really is a big part of the focus of what we're trying to do. So we realize that character is imparted not just through words, but it's a mentorship part of it is what we talk about. So it's a semester-long course. So over 4 months, the kids get to build relationship with mentors through job shadowing to get exposure, but also to build relationships with regular people on our shop floors. And that's where that transference of character starts to happen, where we talk about it one day a week in a classroom for just 90 minutes, but then we see it modeled out on the shop floor with really awesome professionals doing their job, just regular people out in our companies that can just show the kids what they do, but also model what it means to be a good person. So on this slide, mentorship in the real world experience, not in a classroom, in our actual businesses. Core goals, it's really to empower young people, because a lot of these kids, they're on their phones all the time. They don't know what it means to really have a job. They don't have a sense of purpose because maybe we just don't give them a sense of purpose, and really give them a lot of confidence. I often say that the blue collar kids, which I was one of, I was a late bloomer. I was socially awkward, had terrible self-esteem, and just didn't know where I fit in. And so that's, to this day, still a lot of those kids. In our high school, the tech ed department is at the end of a long hall, cut off from the rest of the school. and we're kind of the outcasts. I don't know how else I can say it, but that's what I felt like. I felt at home in the shop classes, but throughout the rest of the school, I just didn't feel like I fit in. And those are the kids that I go after because that was my happy place, and those are the kids who often need it. And the other side of that is, building a workforce that really connects with our communities and our businesses and really explore, not only our job, and maybe they do need to go to a four-year university, maybe they need to go to a tech college, but just to show them what's out there so they can get exposure to all the opportunities. And as mentors and facilitators, we can really help guide those kids over that 4-month experience. The character part of it, I've already listed a lot of these off, but again, think about what kind of employee you want in your company. And I often have said, and we hear it all the time, we can teach skills, but if you give me a choice between a person who is incredibly gifted technically, but doesn't have the character part of it, I will take the kid with character and have no technical skills any day of the week. I was in Michigan a couple of weeks ago, and it was fascinating. I heard several stories of companies who tried to hire some of these interns that were off the chart gifted, but their attitudes were so bad they couldn't hire. He lied in his interview. It was very obvious. And the other kid only lasted 2 days because they saw how deplorable his character was. So I think it's all pretty obvious that that's what we need. And I was in Cub Scouts. I was in Boy Scouts for a little while. We're a farming community with 4-H. So one of the things I thought, we have to come up with a way to really impart with these kids a code or a code of ethics or a lifestyle code that somehow says, this is who I am. So if any of you are parents, you'll get a kick out of this because we make the kids memorize this thing called the Craftsman Code. And the Craftsman Code really epitomizes what it means to be a good person. And we make the kids say it out loud. We make them recite it every class. And to make a teenager say number one, you can all read it with me, I'm not the center of the universe, is still to this day, 12 years later, one of the greatest joys that I have every week. And then number two, making a kid say, I do not know everything nor nearly as much as I think I do. And it's humorous, but it's not a beatdown, because we're trying to help the kids realize that when you join one of our trades, you're joining a great fraternity of folks that has evolved over the generations. I've got on my desk here, I'll reach for it real quick. In machining, we have the Machinery's Handbook. You can see how thick that is. This is the 25th edition. Tim, do you have a Machinery's Handbook? He's looking for it. What version do you have? You're on mute. You're on mute, Tim. What are you?
Yep. Mine's 25 as well.
Oh, you got the 25. Yeah, we're a little bit older.
Yep.
Is it up to 30 or something right now? Do you remember?
I think it's 32. I have a new copy somewhere, but
and
that one still has my bookmarks in it.
Yeah, and I've got one that I think is like the 17th edition that's out in the shop that's pretty worn. But and we're machinists, and I imagine in the non-ferrous world, you probably have your own stuff, your own Bible of non-ferrous stuff, all the technical knowledge that it's evolved over generations, right? And so the challenge is, how do we impart that knowledge, to the next generation, but also help the kids realize you're part of a really cool, awesome group of people that's evolved over generations, and you're part of something much bigger than yourself. And so that's why we teach number one and number two. But number three, there's dignity and purpose in knowing my trade. Again, Hollywood, our society, they denigrate the trades. How many people even know what non-ferrous is? Like my wife, I had to explain that to her. People have no idea that our modern civilization would not exist without those of us who now know how to make stuff, build stuff, create stuff, fix stuff. And yet we're ignored and we're taken for granted. And I think COVID was actually a huge favor, because for the first time, society-wide, we were asked, what's essential? What jobs are essential? And I still remember when President Trump came on and we're going to shut down society except for essential jobs. Our entire staff came together in our lunchroom, like, do we have jobs? And that morning, how many emails did you all get that said, yeah, we're essential? The government's recognizing that so many of us in manufacturing, the trades, society would not function without us. So, and that really highlights number 4 with a lot of these kids, that to help them recognize and make them say out loud that the world needs me, right? That they're not an accident, they're uniquely gifted, which is actually number 6. Every person has unique gifts and talents, and they fit somewhere. And so when we can take a student over the months to help them realize, yeah, you're not the center of the universe, you don't know everything, but man, the world really needs you. We need you. You have a place in this world. That's really a home run for us. I'm going to pause so I can take a breath. Tim, I want to you help facilitate the class. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like teaching this code to the kids?
Um, for me, it was quite enjoyable. As a facilitator, we get a guidebook that helps us kind of form our thoughts around these codes, and gives us a little bit of lesson plans to work with. And it was really enjoyable. It takes a couple of sessions to get the students to start to open up. Um, but once they do, once they see that I'm not a teacher from school, I'm a shop guy. I've been building things my whole life, and you start you probe and you ask questions, and then they start opening up. And for me,
Yeah.
it was quite enjoyable. It was really a joy to work with the students. It's rewarding to me personally. Um, it wasn't the point
Yeah.
of the course, but it gave me a lot of introspective thoughts myself. And
What
um,
what was for you working with the students? What did you see a transformation or a change in them over 4 months, or what was that like for you?
yeah, I definitely a change, but it was more of an openness. It became more of um, I guess openness, but also reassurance and self-assurance in themselves.
Yeah.
Um, they were confident enough to answer questions. Initially you ask some of the questions we ask them are a little tough. They put them on the spot,
Yeah.
and you got to drag answers out of them to begin with, and you share things from your own self to try and open that up. But then by the end of the course, they're able to have fairly adult conversations. There's still plenty
Yeah.
of joking around and that type of thing, but they can talk about serious topics in a
Yeah.
respectable manner.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. I want to come back to that in a little bit, because Tim is a great example of one of our business partners who became a facilitator in our course. So the way it works is that we have folks, we have businesses, schools, facilitators, and mentors. So obviously, the students, and we partner with the local schools to select the kids, coming into the program, often the blue collar kids. But the key to me has always been the businesses, where the kids have to get in that real world environment and to see what's out there. But another really, really key role, 2 more key roles, but one of them that Tim fulfilled was a facilitator. And what's different about this course is we flipped the educational model. So for 90 minutes a day, 4 days a week, they're job shadowing. 1 day a week, they're getting character education that we take them through a curriculum. And what's really awesome is that we get people like Tim that are not teachers, they're regular shop owners, could be retired people in the community that hold the role of a facilitator. And the facilitator is that person who helps lead the discussion. And we often we call them purposely facilitators, because we want them to facilitate a discussion with these kids. Because these kids often have not been, they've told me repeatedly, they're not often asked what they think. And I think so far, so much today, I'm really encouraged what's happening in society, that there's a huge resurgence of teaching technical skills. But the problem is, a lot of these kids, they have either trauma, they come from disadvantaged homes, they got a lot of challenges. We've got kids that sometimes are raising themselves. They don't have a lot of maybe parental support, and they need to deal with all of that to figure out who they are before they can really select a trade or career to move into. I mean, how many times are we getting students in high school that are saying, yeah, you just got to go in something. And they select a trade, might be welding, or it could be for a university, without any reflection or any guidance on figuring out what that is. So the course has this facilitator role that, again, are for people like Tim, who facilitate a discussion. We also really stress, you got to, as Tim mentioned, you got to share your own stories. You got to be vulnerable to really draw the kids out. But over those 16 weeks, the kids start opening up and they start understanding who they are, where they fit. And by the end of the course, you're getting to know them, they're getting to know the businesses, and the kids can make a much better career choice and maybe where they'll end up. We also require the kids, they wrote, if you have a business, for instance, we try to have 4 to 5 businesses in a community so that kids get to see all the different businesses that are out there. And so that's where we say they'll rotate every couple of weeks, every week or two to see different companies or different departments within your company. And then they're also required to journal, where it's a daily journal and it's graded by the school coordinator, which the school plays an important role because it's an actual high school accredited course. And that coordinator plays a key role in just helping make sure the kids show up, get them on a schedule and figure out, that they are fulfilling the requirements of the course. And the school also helps selects. I personally like sophomores and juniors in Wisconsin because if they come through our course, Edgerton Gear, we make this course a prerequisite for summer internships, a youth apprenticeship, etc. So if you get them in Wisconsin as a sophomore or junior, they can enter a youth apprenticeship for 1 or 2 years. And hopefully they'll also show interest in the trades. And the school can usually figure that out pretty quickly. And they just got to be compliant. They don't have to be perfect. Well, I often say, give me the problem kids in schools because those are the kids that are probably going to do pretty well in the shop. We don't want to be totally rebellious where they're acting out to a point they won't take instruction, but we want them to at least, respect authority. And I often say in my shop, my rules. And the kids are 99% of the time very, very respectful. On the business side, the business commitment, there's a couple roles you could play, but the main one is to host the class where the kids just get to job shadow and be mentored. That is mentors that are just on your shop floor that's willing to spend time with some kids. And we do the training. Thank you, Kristen, that we do a 1-hour virtual training for your people in your company. And the kids are not allowed to quote work. You can't pay. They're not getting paid. They're job shadowing, but you want to give them something to do. And that's kind of a fine line that you can teach them things as long as it's under supervision. Like you can teach them to weld, you can teach them to do certain things, but not heavy equipment. Can't run cranes, lift trucks, and that kind of thing. But that mentor plays just, again, that key role of just showing the kids what the job is and just as a professional, what it looks like on the shop floor. Classroom facility. Am I moving too fast, Kristen? Were you okay?
No, I think so. And I can't see any questions that have come through. Bill, I guess, are we going to save questions for the end, if there are any? Or he's on mute. I'm assuming.
Sorry, I was in mute. Yeah, I haven't seen anything yet, but I know
Okay.
I got a couple as we go, so
All right.
we'll definitely let you go through this, and then
Yep.
we'll
5
ask
minutes
some.
more
Yeah.
at the most. Yep. I don't want to be talking the whole time. So I just kind of want to give you an overview. So to recap, we got the schools, we got the businesses, we got the mentors on the shop floor, and then we have facilitators that help run the classroom, which again could be somebody like Tim, a business owner. It could be a retired person in the community that just has real world experience that works great with kids and can lead a discussion. But that facilitator role, they model integrity, humility, and purpose, and they're being vulnerable with the kids, and they can guide the discussion, which our curriculum takes 16 weeks. It takes you through all of that. And it's just really an opportunity to get the kids in the class and talk. Craftsman with Character, we provide all the training. We provide all the class materials. Really, it's just a willingness like Tim that likes kids, wants to play that role of kind of picking their brains and having a discussion with them and just being a good role model. So next, Kristen. That's the guts of it. So if you think in terms of your involvement, at the bare minimum, you want to be a company that you allow kids to come in and just job shadow. But if you want to go in another role, we have what we often call champion businesses that you actually will host the class. We've got companies that open up their conference room that 1 day a week, and we need a Wi-Fi whiteboard because we show some films, we have case studies. We also limit the class to approximately 10 students because there's a lot of small group dynamics that take place because we want the kids to be vulnerable and open up. In my business, we started at 7:30 and we run from 7:30 to 9. Depending on your school, that could change. I don't know if we have any businesses or classes that we're running in the afternoon, but I think the majority of them are in the morning. So a business champion could host that classroom part of it and also help be a facilitator and also help be that liaison between other businesses in your community. So it helps with scheduling and troubleshooting, and you work directly with the high school. And it's great if there's at least one or two businesses in the community that can really play that role and help just kind of spearhead it because it's something new. And I will say that schools are different. Some just totally get this right off the bat. Some schools are kind of reluctant because it's one more thing that's being thrown at them. But as our superintendent said, if you get two or three businesses in your community or one large employer that you go to the principal or superintendent and say, hey, really want to do this? More often than not, the school's going to say, okay, yeah, let's take a hard look at this. Program implementation and support. Again, the school and the business works together to create an entire fall semester schedule. My middle son is our tech ed teacher in Edgerton. We're blessed to have him. But together, the school and the business, you coordinate the schedule. When you do a kickoff, what businesses are going, the schedule, when the kids are going where. You could even, if this is too much right out of the gate, you could even be one of those businesses that just are open to tours where you could show your business. One thing we didn't mention is that your local tech college, our tech college, Black Hawk Tech, has played a huge role because we're part of a state line manufacturing alliance. So part of the rotations that we send the kids to the tech school for a week, and the tech school gets to show off all their programs. It's kind of a great PR thing for them to show all the kids you could actually, attend a tech school after this. And again, businesses rotate every couple of weeks, which we've covered. The cool thing about all this, because we got funding from the Navy and we're open to grant money and corporate sponsorships, but the program is basically free. And we provide the curriculum, we provide the training for not only the schools, the businesses, the facilitators, the mentors, and we've got the templates, we have the program checklists. And since I've been doing it for 12 years, I've learned a lot. I was doing it by myself for probably the first 9 years. And now I've got a couple very, very experienced, not old, just experienced educators of 30 plus years experience that have just helped us take it to another level, that they understand how to talk to the schools, and from an educational side, how we can make it as great as possible. I like this slide because this is kind of old data that I think this was Deb, was this from last year, real quick?
Yeah, it was from the fall, I think.
Yeah. It was from up to and including the 3 fall cohorts that ran this school year. I've got the survey pulled up. I can give a rough estimate of what it is now here, if you give me a second.
Yeah. So Deb and Michael are both our educators. They've both been in education for 30 plus years. We just did our graduation class yesterday, and we had 10 students, and we're batting 100%. 100% of the kids are going into trades for manufacturing, from machining to welding to auto tech to, oh my gosh, I forgot them all. The funnest one is one of the kids is going into business with his dad, who does weld drilling, water weld, residential weld drilling. Heavy equipment was another one. So it's really just providing a pathway and showing the kids this is what's possible. And I think the better we get at this, the more we're seeing kids moving into the trades. So,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, just real quick, started this in 2012, just did it for my own company. And as I mentioned, it completely changed our company. I have, as an owner, and we've become an ESOP now because I was struggling for years. What am I going to do with the business? Well, I have such a phenomenal group of young people aged from 18 to the early 30s. The original class I did in 2014, 13. did 10 students, 5 of those guys are still with me, but now they're phenomenal leaders. And those guys are helping mentor the next generation of guys that are in their mid-20s who are now helping mentor the kids who are 18, 19, and 20. So with the Navy funding, I started chairing the class with Beloit, which Deb is she was working with Beloit High School at the time. And when the Navy awarded us a 3-year grant to grow these things, we pretty quickly went from 2 classes to 23. And as we mentioned, as Bill mentioned, we're pushing 50 to 60 schools this next school year. And I already mentioned there's no cost, but we do invite businesses to help support the growth because we don't know how long the Navy funding is going to be. But my thinking all along is we want to make it as accessible to everybody and not charge. So if we get corporate sponsorships or further government funding, whatever, ideally, if a company has experienced had a good experience and they want to support us, that's great, but we're not pressuring anybody to do that. Again, I just would really like to pay it forward and see more communities really benefit from this. I'll end there on that slide, but Kristen, did I miss anything before we get into questions?
No, that was a full recap.
Hopefully I didn't talk too
Take a
much. I'm
breath,
paranoid
yeah.
about talking too much.
Yeah.
No, it was good.
Dave, I'll let you breathe for a second as I say this question, and maybe this is something Kristen or others can answer. If, say, a foundry wants to be a part of this, or anyone who's listening to this wants to be a part of this, do you recommend that they first get a couple of other manufacturing companies together to say, hey, we're interested in this before reaching out to a school? Or do you think that it's, it can be a one-to-one situation? So is it better to get a group together, or can you start as that one champion?
Chris, do you want to handle that one?
Oh, sure. Maybe we have different answers. I think what we have found is that having that, what we call the business champion, one business that is really spearheading this initiative in your community, that's enough to go into a school and say, hey, we want to do this, and we have all these other business contacts in our community. Obviously, the more the better, but I think it depends on your relationships in the community. If you, after hearing this, find, you might be thinking, hey, I know a few other business owners or a few other people in my town that would be interested in something like this. Sure. You can send them our way. They can attend a presentation similar to this, and we can help funnel you guys into the right conversation with your school. I would say it kind of depends. I don't know, Dave, how would you answer that?
I think you answered it great. If you've got a large employer, I just ran the course here in my shop, and I'm only a 40-man shop. I ran it, for 10 years by myself, or 9 years. But if the more businesses you can provide, the better, because it gives the kids more of a well-rounded experience of what's out there. But at the same time, if you're just one large employer and you can break your shop up into, say, 7 or 8 different departments, so you could show the kids, kind of a whole overview of your entire business, that works too. So I think, Bill, it really depends on the school. If you've got a great relationship, it could happen pretty fast. But if you've got a district that's like, yeah, we don't know, or we think we're doing all this stuff already, then I would gather some forces to go to the school and say, hey, we're really excited about this and we want to make this happen. And from that standpoint, even if the school is reluctant, you have them get on one of our overview sessions for educators that Michael and Deb would run. And I think that would kind of get him hooked. Michael and Deb, did you want to chime in on that question?
No, I think you guys have nailed it. It's, I don't think there's anything that we could add that would say much different.
Okay.
Agree.
Okay.
Great. What else, Bill?
All right. Well, the other component is when you're talking about the group of manufacturers that are involved in the program, do you think it's better if it's, say, like one foundry, one machine shop, one weld shop, maybe one additive? I mean, or do you think, is it better to have, diverse group of, industries represented, or, does that, matter?
We had a visitor yesterday from a metal stamping company, fairly good sized one here in Wisconsin, and he wanted to see our graduation, get a tour of our shop, et cetera. And he asked me well, he turned to me at one point and said, "So you don't do this just to get employees, do you?" And I was very perceptive of him because I said, no, if we get one student that comes to work with us a year, I'm good with that. Because the bigger picture, we want, as he said in his words, I could see this just helping a kid find their way if he's really gifted as an auto tech, right? I want a good auto tech fixing my car. I want a good plumber fixing, fixing my toilet. And so from my perspective, the more experiences you can give your kids, it's really a heart to help your whole community. Only 34% nationwide people actually graduate from a four-year university. So what about the other 66%? Those kids got to end up somewhere. So I think most of our partners really get that they are looking at this generation of kids and how do we help? How can we help them find their way? And if that's your motivation, I think it's you're if you care for kids to that extent, you're going to end up getting kids that want to work for you because the kids pick that up really quick. If you go into this just with the mindset, I just want employees, the kids are going to pick up on that you're just looking at them as a number, just as a warm body. So my perspective is to answer your question, the more engagement, diversity that you can get of companies and trades in your cohort, I think it's that much more beneficial.
And one of the things also is you talked a little bit about how schools are recruiting the students, and I always go back to that 92% of high school students have never taken a manufacturing technology course. So you're really going after that 92%. The 8% or even the 2% are already on the pathway in career and technical education. Those aren't the students that will be involved in the program. It's really that 92% that haven't had the exposure.
It's everybody. A lot of kids in Edgerton, since my son is a tech ed teacher, most of those kids might have an idea. They know they want to work with their hands, but maybe they're getting pressured by their parents to go to a four-year university. We had a young man that changed his major today. This year, he was going to go into university and decided he wanted to be a welder. Or it could be kids who think they want to be engineers, but they have never ever been in a machine shop before. And Deb often talks about that. Where Deb, you want to mention that real quick?
Sure. The school that I taught at was high poverty, very diverse school. And when we started Craftsman with Character, I was coming out of teaching math for 30 years before that, before I stepped into my role as academy coach. And the tech ed teacher came to me and he said, Deb, you get kids all the time who say they want to be engineers in your calculus class, but they have never ever taken a class in my department and they don't know what tools to use. They've never built anything in their life. How are they going to be engineers? And to his point, it was a great point. And I remember because as I went through school, I took drafting classes and tech ed classes. So for me, that tied in really well to my math. And so I started recruiting the kids who are telling me, I want to be an engineer. And they also took Craftsman with Character. And what I think the dynamic that surprised us all was when those kids walked into the class versus maybe the kids who have always said, I want to work hands-on. I don't ever want to go to college after that. Like, I want to build, I want to do this. When they first walked in the class, they sat in very separate corners of the classroom. And by the end of the class, they had each learned from each other because we pair them differently. They didn't get to pick their partners. When they went to different businesses, they were always paired with a new student. So they had to get to know each other. And what they got to know is these engineers realized how talented some of the other kids were that they'd never seen in class or had developed a misconception about the talents and skills that these kids had. And the kids that were saying, I don't like school, I don't ever want to go back to school once I graduate, they started looking at these kids who wanted to be engineers, and these kids who wanted to be engineers were actually really curious and wanting to learn how to do some of the things that and appreciating the skills that these students had. And so by the end, they had developed this great rapport with each other. And, thinking about your shops, you want your engineers to work and well with and respect the guys that are on the floor and vice versa. And that has been a really cool thing to watch develop in the high school. So our students walk out with this understanding that it takes a team and a group of people who have their unique gifts and talents, but together make this incredible product. And that to me has been really game changing. One of my students is going on a 4 year, actually a 5 year scholarship, and by the time he's done, he'll have both a bachelor's and a master's degree in mechanical engineering. He never would have thought of that or been able to achieve getting that scholarship without going through Craftsman with Character and being able to talk about what he learned in that class. So it's been a really cool mix of things. And one of the things he talks about is seeing these other students' skills and abilities to build and create.
Yeah.
Now, Tim, I'm going to ask you a quick question. As you said, as a small shop, if there, there are, foundries out there that have 10, 25 people that work for them. We're not talking, and then there are some that have, hundreds of people that work. As a small shop, how did you get over we don't have the time, we don't have the resources to be a part of this program?
Well, I guess I'd start with if you don't think you have time now, you're going to have even less time in the future. Because if you don't develop that pipeline, it's not going to flow. That's my take on it. That said, I think you can use that shadowing you do with students. If you have the right mentor for that, they see it as a rewarding part of their job. I was talking with an individual a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago now, I guess, and he was sharing his experience at an employer a couple towns over that had participated in Craftsman with Character, and he spoke very, very favorably of it. It was one of his favorite parts of his day was working with the students. So yeah, you can't make more time, but you can work out ways of sharing it. So like at that particular business, they would spend 1 week in one department, 1 week in another department. So each department was only seeing that kind of that burden, if you will, of the students for a week at a time, and then they'd have a week off. So I think there are some creative ways to work around it. But yeah, it is going to be a commitment, and but I think it'll prove worthwhile.
Yeah, and I would add, Tim, that you said it really well. You can't afford not to do it, right? And since we've done this in our company, because I've asked those same questions, can we afford? It's going to take time. Guys are going to be explaining things to kids, etc. But since I kept metrics for the last 12 years, and literally our productivity and our profitability went up every year. And I started to look like, why? Well, it made our entire staff that much more engaged to a point now where we run the course one semester every year. We just finished it. By October every year, our employees are saying, when are we getting kids again? When are we getting kids again? And when you have to show somebody what you're doing, it ups your game because you got to explain it. You got to think about it. But that sense of purpose that Tim talked about, I think we all get to an age at some point, maybe it's in the 50s for a lot of us that we start asking the question, am I leaving this world a better place than when I left it? And it's that question of legacy. And I've got so many of my guys now who are so proud. I had one young guy come in yesterday, 32. And he just wanted to thank me and shake my hand. And I said, for what? And he goes, this is the most awesome thing that I get to do. I get to share my life with these younger guys. He's only 32. And he said, one of the students asked me why I'm here. And at first I answered, well, I get paid well. But then he said, you know what? It's way deeper than that because I get to make an impact on other people and other people like me coming up. So to me, the bigger issue, as Tim said it really well, if you don't do it now, when are you going to have time? And you could keep trying Indeed, you could keep trying to recruit, but once we get this off the ground, what in our company, it just becomes a self-perpetuating pipeline where kids are now sharing other kids and they're inviting kids. We have a waiting list of kids we want to take the class. And now they start inviting their friends and you get this reputation that this is the place that I want to work. And we do zero recruiting now because we just got a constant flow.
Yeah, that's something I really like when I always tell, you know, companies and manufacturers where I've been doing workforce development over 12 years is it starts just with your company walking
Mhm.
across the street, talking to your local school and saying, "Hey, here I am. Here's what I do. What can we do to help support you? And what
Yep.
can we do to make sure that these students know about amazing opportunities they have by coming
Yep.
to work at our facility?"
Yep.
Um, and I think what you're doing to be able to open those doors is amazing. Truly appreciate this, on behalf of behalf of
Yeah.
NIST, behalf of manufacturers. Thank you for having this program available at
Yeah.
another one at no cost. But that's not only just helping, as you said, with building talent pipelines, but as Tim and both Dave, you mentioned, it's also for retention. You also
Yeah.
are
Yep.
able to help keep the people because you see that as a company, you're doing something to ensuring that there's a future and there's an
Yeah.
opportunity. Or as Tim even mentioned before, you might be even building mentors in your facility because they are teaching these students about what it means to be working here, which means
Yeah.
they understand what it means and how
Yep.
special it is.
And I would add too, Bill, in a couple conversations I just had with a gentleman up in Traverse City this morning. They have an employer that they had 1/3 of their workforce turnover in the last year. 145 people, and they had 45 people turnover. And the first thought I had is culture. You know, how and he's at a great company. But what we've talked about is you need to communicate to the young people why you exist, what the bigger picture is, what the purpose is of being there. And especially as a host company, I make our new employees, even if we get employees that don't come through Craftsman, I make them take the course because it provides us as a company to tell our story and to share our case studies and to share our history. And one of our students that just, when we just graduated, asked we asked all the kids what was the highlight, and he said, I got to learn the history of this place. Now he feels connected. And I think that's one of the big issues of turnover is people, we don't do enough time explaining where our products go, how important we are as a company to society, and how important they are in playing that role. And again, I often say that kids are looking for two things. They're looking for a sense of purpose and they're looking for where they belong. And there's no better place, I think, than in our companies to provide that our young people for that, both of those.
Well, I think this is a great way for us to stop the webinar or conclude the webinar because Dave and Kristen, Deb, Tim, and Michael, we really appreciate you spending the time with us. Being able to talk about Craftsmen with Character. We're looking forward to being able to post the tape of this out so people can, I'm sorry, as a Gen X, I'm saying tape. I should be saying the recording. Um, the recording of this webinar, having this out there and letting other people know about it. And I know you had the QR code, and we will include in our articles. We'll include on our social media also the links so people can watch again the recording and also know how to reach out to you to learn more about this program. So thank you very much
Awesome.
for taking the time. And all we're hoping for is that your 60 schools turn into 120 schools.
Oh boy. Oh boy. But
It's
thank
always
you,
worth a
Bill.
shot.
It is. Thank you so much for
All
the
right,
opportunity
thank
to
you.
share with you all. Appreciate it.